Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the heart of Tenochtitlan, where stone walkways glow under torchlight and the lake's surface holds the city like a shimmering mirror. You move slowly through the cool night air, your sandals soft against the smooth basalt streets. The city hums with a kind of calm that feels ancient, practiced, almost ritual in its steadiness. In the distance, you hear the muted thump of a drum echoing from a temple courtyard, steady as a heartbeat. You probably won't survive this if you show up late to Aztec court without the proper bow. But luckily, tonight you're just drifting, unbothered, watching history happen from the safest possible angle. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward, drifting with a relaxed, dreamlike clarity toward the calm hearts of the Aztec judicial world. It's not exactly what you expect. You imagine chaotic shouting, maybe even judges waving obsidian knives dramatically, because that's how movies like to frame things. But instead, you find yourself in a surprisingly orderly plaza. The court is held outdoors, as many of them were, the night breeze blending with the low murmur of voices. Elders sit cross-legged, their cloaks neatly folded, and even the torch flames seem to flicker with disciplined restraint. Here, justice feels less like punishment and more like choreography. You stand at the edge, watching as the next case is brought forward, a simple land dispute between neighbors. One claims a boundary marker was moved by exactly the width of his foot. The other insists it was the wind. This already feels like the kind of argument you'd overhear in a modern apartment hallway. The judges listen, leaning in slightly, not interrupting. No one is yelling, no one is pacing dramatically. It's almost soothing in its slowness. A mainstream historical fact drifts up from the scene. Aztec courts were known for being layered and structured, local courts for daily issues, district courts for bigger ones, and prestigious noble courts for anything major. And although punishments could be severe in practice, the process was deeply ritualized and surprisingly fair. Historians still argue whether commoners actually had more legal protection than nobles in some scenarios. It's an oddly reassuring thought that even in a famously intense empire, justice tried to strike a balance. Beside you, a scribe scratches everything into a folded codex with the sort of concentration you wish you had when filling out tax forms. The soft scraping of his brush is strangely relaxing, like the ASMR version of record keeping. The man's quill flicks left, right, then pauses to blow gently on the fresh ink, giving the moment an unexpectedly delicate air. Somewhere in this calm haze, you notice your mind wandering. Imagine trying to explain to him that in the future, people complain about captchas instead of land boundaries. The judges confer, nodding with slow, measured gestures. There is no wooden gavel to slam, just the authoritative clearing of an elder's throat, which somehow feels much more intimidating. Their decision? Remeasure the land using official markers and assign both parties a day of community maintenance duty for letting the argument get this far. Honestly, that feels fair. If your neighbor accused you of moving your fence by foot-width increments, you'd probably deserve a day of yard work too. You move deeper into the plaza, observing other small cases unfold. A woman accuses a man of damaging her canoe. He accuses her of exaggerating. The judges again listen with the patience of people who have heard literally every excuse known to humanity. You can almost sense a cosmic eye roll when the defendant tries the ancient equivalent of, "Actually, it wasn't my fault. It was my cousin's cousin's friend who borrowed it." Some things never change. One of the more fringe tidbits slips into your awareness. Some courts reportedly use professional orators, people who would help you phrase your complaint in a polished, respectful, metaphor-filled manner. Imagine hiring someone just to help you say, "My neighbor keeps stealing my maize." A small joke flutters through your sleepy mind. Somewhere in the Aztec Empire, there was definitely someone whose entire job was basically being a very dramatic lawyer poet. As you drift along the edge of the court, you sense how much of Aztec justice is rooted in subtle symbolism. A punishment is almost never just a punishment. It's a message, a rebalancing, a reminder of community responsibility. A thief might be required to repay goods, but also sweep public squares. A quarrelsome neighbor might be assigned to help repair canals. Physical work restoring the literal flow of the city's life water. Everything loops back to harmony. Even the more severe punishments, which you'll see in later sections, have ritual meaning behind them. But tonight, in this first gentle step into the Empire's legal world, you simply watch the soft machinery of justice turning. You listen to the mother calling on behalf of her son, who has, apparently, lost someone else's turkey. The court decides he will owe the owner a new one and help them tend their household garden for a few days. You can't help the small smile that creeps across your face. Losing a turkey was apparently a whole legal ordeal, and suddenly your missing socks feel far less stressful. You notice the soft glow of torches reflecting on polished stone as the crowd shifts. People bow, showing gratitude for the verdicts. Even those who received penalties seem calm. There's none of the dramatic resistance or courtroom plot twists you might expect. Everything unfolds slowly, soothingly, like a collective exhale. The Empire's legal culture rests on predictability, clarity, and ritual, three things that your modern inbox desperately lacks. Another thought nudges in. Historians still argue whether commoners had the right to appeal cases more freely than nobles. Some evidence suggests they did. You imagine a noble grumbling about how their social advantages somehow got lost in translation when stepping into court. The cosmic balance of justice for all, humming beneath the Empire's surface. You linger as the final cases of the day wind down. The plaza grows quieter, the hum of voices softening into a tranquil buzz. A judge rubs his temples wearily. A few spectators stretch as if leaving a long meeting. A small child, bored out of their mind, pokes a beetle with a reed. And through it all, the steady lake breeze glides across your cheeks. You sense that tonight's journey has only begun. This was the soft doorway into a legal world more complex, symbolic, and, on occasion, bizarre than you ever expected. Soon, you'll wander the markets, witness odd punishments for feather thieves, and eavesdrop on drunks trying to talk their way out of trouble. But not yet. For now, you breathe in the stillness of Aztec justice, firm, ritual-bound, strangely serene. You leave the quiet formality of the court behind and drift toward a livelier corner of Tenochtitlan, the bustling marketplace of Tlatelolco. Even at a relaxed, bedtime pace, the place vibrates with energy. You move between stalls under woven awnings, the air thick with the aroma of roasted maize, honey cakes, and those chilies that always seem to burn your nostrils even when you're just passing by. Traders call softly to customers, showing off their obsidian blades, bright dyes, clay pots, and stacks of tamales steaming in neat bundles. It feels almost comforting, like wandering through your favorite weekend market, minus the guy aggressively handing out free samples while judging your life choices. You glide deeper into the flow of people and notice something. The marketplace isn't chaotic at all. It's incredibly organized. Aztec markets had official judges stationed nearby, trained inspectors walking the aisles, and designated areas for each good. Textiles in one lane, food in another, luxury items grouped near the center. A mainstream historical fact threads gently through the scene. The Aztecs considered marketplace fairness essential to the empire's well-being. Cheating wasn't just rude, it disrupted cosmic balance. And if there's anything you're learning tonight, it's that the Aztecs treated cosmic balance like the universe's very strict manager. But you're here for the punishments, the bizarre, the unexpected, the lightly embarrassing consequences for market day mischief.
A commotion stirs near a stall selling chilies and spices. Not a dramatic commotion, nothing wild, just a subtle ripple through the crowd. You drift closer to find the vendor being questioned by two calm market inspectors. A woman claims he's been quietly swapping higher quality chili paste with a watered down version. You watch as they sniff the paste, dab it, exchange looks, then nod knowingly. You can practically hear the vendor's internal, uh-oh.
And the punishment? Not jail, not yelling. Instead, the offender is marched gently, almost politely, to the center of the market where everyone can see him and forced to sit there with his goods displayed beside him as inspectors announce the misdeed. A public calling out. Mild embarrassment delivered with ceremonial calm. It's surprisingly effective. And honestly, if someone made you sit in the middle of a farmer's market while announcing that you once tried to sell your cousin's birthday gift to buy a video game, you'd probably reform yourself instantly. Small joke number 1 for this section. Don't worry, I'll sprinkle in 2 more as we go. As you continue strolling, you pass a stall where a woman sells ceramic pots glazed in soft blues and greens. She looks up and gives you a polite nod. The glaze shimmers in the light, catching your eye long enough for you to imagine dropping one, then imagining the punishment for breaking merchandise you haven't paid for. Lucky for you, the Aztecs had a practical system. If you accidentally broke something, you either bought it or compensated the vendor with labor. Simple, clean, no drawn-out legal drama. Historians still argue whether vendors could refuse compensation in rare cases involving sacred items, but the general flow remained fair. Nearby, a group of teenage boys hover around a fruit stall, pretending not to stare at the pile of ripe guavas. Their totally innocent browsing routine lasts exactly 10 seconds before one tries a casual grab and run. You watch as 2 market wardens intercept him before he even takes 3 steps. This isn't their first rodeo. The boy looks guilty enough to melt into the cobblestones. But again, no violence, no shouting. Instead, they lead him back, make him apologize, and assign him several days of sweeping duty in the marketplace plaza. It's punishment with a side of public humility. And you can practically hear the internal monologue buzzing in his head. I should have just paid for the guava. A quirky fringe tidbit surfaces in your thoughts. Some accounts describe marketplace punishments involving temporary head shaving. Not full dramatic head shaving, but just a small symbolic patch. The kind of light embarrassment with cultural meaning the Aztecs were very good at. Imagine going home with a random bald spot because you tried to scam someone on chili paste. That's the type of humiliation designed to make your mother lecture you before you even open your mouth. As you drift along, a loud conversation distracts you. A vendor selling rabbit skins is arguing with a customer about miscounted goods. The vendor insists he handed over 20 skins. The buyer insists it was 19. A weighing stone is brought out, and the vendor is proven wrong. The customer stands calmly, arms crossed, as the inspector delivers the punishment. The vendor must return the missing value and offer 1 extra skin as an apology. A compensation plus a courtesy fee. Honestly, that's smoother than most customer service experiences today. Small joke number 2. File this under reasons ancient markets might be less stressful than modern returns counters. You pause near the back of the marketplace, where spices, dyes, and luxury feathers shimmer in the warm light. The bustle softens here, and the atmosphere feels more elegant, more controlled. It's the perfect place for trouble to hide under the illusion of refinement. A man in an embroidered cloak stands nervously beside his stall as an inspector checks his merchandise. The issue? He claims his dyes are high-quality imports from the Gulf Coast, but the inspector quietly leans in and murmurs something. A quick test reveals they're local imitations. The punishment? The vendor must display a sign carved from thin wood, declaring he sold false goods. Not forever, just for a set number of market cycles. Long enough for people to remember, short enough for him to recover if he reforms. The Aztecs weren't trying to ruin lives, they were trying to guide behavior. One more example of justice as balance, not justice as destruction. While standing there, another scholarly debate floats into your awareness. Historians still argue whether marketplace judges had full authority to override district courts in trading disputes, or whether they were simply the first step in a larger appeal system. Evidence is scattered, and codices leave just enough ambiguity to keep academics happily arguing forever. For you tonight, it's simply a reminder that even the most organized ancient systems had their mysteries. As evening deepens, the sounds of the marketplace shift. Drummers start practicing in the distance, and the air grows cooler. You keep wandering, glancing at baskets of cacao beans, the empire's currency. One inspector stands nearby, using a hollowed gourd to test whether beans are hollowed out or counterfeit. Counterfeit cacao was a known issue. Imagine someone trying to scam the empire with fake money made of painted shells. Oh wait, small joke number 3. People absolutely try that kind of thing today too. Some behaviors are eternal. A young woman approaches a vendor selling woven mats. She quietly points out that he tried to overcharge her earlier. She didn't complain at the time, but the guilt apparently wore her down, and she's back now with a market official. They check the pricing. The vendor admits the mistake. He's assigned to weave 2 small mats for the woman, free of charge, and apologize publicly. The scene is gentle, almost tender. The punishment is corrective, but respectful. By now, you've seen enough to understand the rhythm of Aztec market justice. It's public, symbolic, and often mildly humiliating, but rarely cruel. These punishments are about restoring trust in the marketplace, not destroying offenders. When tens of thousands of people gather to trade goods, food, clothes, tools, even gossip, you need fairness to keep the cosmic scale steady. You take one last stroll past the stalls as a soft breeze stirs the smells of cacao, masa dough, and sweet copal smoke. Vendors close their awnings, children chase each other between baskets, and the night folds gently over the rows of goods. You sense the next part of your journey waiting, those luxurious feathers so prized that stealing even a single one could lead to punishments more unusual than anything you've seen so far. But for this moment, you stand quietly at the edge of the marketplace, surrounded by calm voices, warm lantern light, and the soft heartbeats of a civilization that believed fairness wasn't just a rule, it was a cosmic responsibility. You leave the scent of chili paste and the echoes of marketplace chatter behind, drifting down a quieter causeway as evening settles deeper over Tenochtitlan. The air cools, brushing against your skin like a soft whisper. You follow the path toward a district known not for food or pottery, but for something far lighter: feathers. Bright, iridescent, impossibly delicate feathers. The kind that seem to glow even in low torchlight, shimmering with greens and blues and golds stolen from the sun. You've wandered into the world of Aztec feather workers, amanteca, and the prized goods they guarded with almost sacred intensity. Here, feathers weren't just decorations. They were currency, status, religious offerings, royal attire, and tiny symbols of cosmic balance. You feel it immediately, as if the very air around you takes on a shimmering texture. But of course, where there is value, there is theft. And where there is theft, there are consequences. You approach a workshop where artisans sit cross-legged on woven mats, carefully pressing hummingbird feathers into a mosaic that depicts a swirling serpent. Even from your vantage point, you can tell these people possess a level of patience and hand-eye coordination you absolutely do not. You drop your phone once a week minimum. These people are gluing microscopic feathers into art pieces the size of dinner plates. It's humbling and a little unfair. Aztec feather art was so valued that some tribute lists demanded tens of thousands of feathers at once, each one plucked, sorted, cleaned, and prepared with ritual care. It wasn't just work, it was almost spiritual. And that's why stealing feathers wasn't treated like petty theft. It was treated like disrupting something sacred. As you watch the artisans, you notice a crowd forming around a stall that sells bundles of quetzal feathers. You drift closer, curiosity pulling you along. A vendor stands stiffly before a pair of patrol officials, calm, stern, and surprisingly well-dressed for people who spend all day policing feathers. The issue? Someone claims the vendor knowingly purchased stolen feathers. That's serious business here. Not you get a warning and go home serious, more like prepare for public ritual embarrassment serious. The accused man shakes his head vigorously. His cloak swishes with every denial. Historians still argue whether buyers were presumed guilty of knowledge when purchasing questionable goods, or whether they were given the benefit of the doubt unless proven otherwise. Tonight, this man is definitely arguing for the second option. The feather bundles are inspected, laid out, sorted, and checked against tribute records. Then an artisan steps forward, the feather worker equivalent of an expert witness, and examines them with a practiced eye. He lifts a single feather, tilts it, and sighs in a way that tells you everything. These were stolen from a noble household's tribute shipment. The vendor winces. You feel the emotional version of getting caught taking someone else's Uber Eats order. But the punishment isn't violent, it's ritual, symbolic, and, let's be honest, just bizarre enough to stick in your mind. The officials lead him to the front of the district and sit him on a low platform made of woven reeds. He is instructed to wear a mantle inside out, a visual sign that he has inverted the proper order of things. His hair is brushed forward awkwardly. A large, gaudy feather headdress, comically oversized, is placed on his head. You quickly realize this is punishment number one for the feather crimes: forced public humiliation through fashion statements. Small joke number one? Imagine being punished by being forced to cosplay as your own crime. Still, as silly as it looks, this is serious business. Losing face in the Aztec world carried significant social consequences. Reputation mattered, honor mattered, and here, the goal wasn't to hurt the man physically, it was to remind him, and everyone watching, that feather trade was sacred. You linger a bit longer as the officials recite his misdeed to onlookers. People nod, whisper, and continue about their business. Feathers rustle softly in the evening breeze, catching light like tiny slices of moon. Nearby, another case is unfolding, this time involving a young boy caught sneaking a handful of hummingbird feathers from a workshop. You watch as he stands beside his nervous mother, shifting his weight from foot to foot. The officials speak gently. Instead of punishment, they assign him to sort damaged feathers for a few days, a quiet, meditative job under the supervision of the artisans. It's correction, not condemnation. Here's where a quirky French tidbit floats in. Some sources suggest that hummingbird feathers were believed to contain small amounts of sacred energy tied to vitality and courage. So stealing them wasn't just theft, it was meddling with symbolic power. One artisan even mutters about the energy of the little bird. You imagine the boy going home later and hearing a lecture that starts with, "Do you know how sacred those feathers are?" and ends with, "And don't even think about touching your brother's things." You move along the walkway and find yourself in a courtyard where nobles view recently finished feather mosaics. Cloaks shimmer with quetzal plumes, capes ripple like moving rainbows. You notice how these items practically glow under any light source. No wonder feather theft was such a big deal. Each plume had value beyond gold or jade. They were tribute pieces, spiritual symbols, even political gifts. As you drift near one noble stall, you overhear a conversation debating whether a certain punishment for feather theft originated from pre-imperial traditions or later legal refinements under Moctezuma II. It's a scholarly debate disguised as casual gossip. Historians still argue about that too, how punishments evolved over time and whether symbolism intensified under later emperors. You catch movement from the corner of your eye. A patrol officer drags forward a man caught trying to steal a quetzal plume from a noble's cloak. Bold move. Foolish move. Definitely the kind of move that earns you a unique and theatrical punishment. The officer holds up the stolen feather and a crowd murmurs. These feathers didn't grow anywhere near the Valley of Mexico. They'd been carried from deep southern forests, then processed by multiple artisans. The punishment is swift and strangely graceful. A reed mat is laid on the ground. The offender is instructed to kneel on it while artisans calmly recount the labor involved in creating even a single ceremonial plume. The offender must repeat each step aloud. Gathered from distant lands, sorted by color, trimmed by experts. It's like a ritualized apology combined with a crash course in artisanal ethics. Then comes the truly bizarre portion, one that absolutely qualifies for your video topic tonight. He is made to wear a set of mismatched leftover feathers, broken, dull, incomplete, while people circle him, chanting softly about humility and honesty. There is no violence, no screaming, just symbolism layered on symbolism wrapped in community expectations. Small joke number 2. It's basically the Aztec version of being forced to wear a kick me sign, except it's handcrafted and spiritually symbolic. You stand back, watching the scene unfold. There's something unexpectedly soothing about it. The crowd isn't angry. The officials are not harsh. It's discipline wrapped in culture, wrapped in ritual. As the crowd disperses, the offender bows deeply, removes the mismatched feathers, and is guided toward a community labor task. Probably sweeping roads or repairing canals. Classic Aztec justice balancing the scales. The courtyard empties, leaving only a soft, shimmering residue of quiet feathers rustling in the wind. They catch the light like tiny slivers of sunrise, reminding you of how much meaning the empire wove into even the smallest things. You breathe in deeply, letting the moment settle. Ahead, the journey will take you into noble districts, where mistakes carry heavier consequences. But for now, you stand in this peaceful, feather-lit evening, surrounded by artisans who turn air into art, and punishments that feel less like cruelty and more like carefully choreographed community theater. Small joke number 3. If you ever commit a crime, pray it's not one involving expensive feathers. You will never live down the outfit they make you wear. The night deepens, and the feathers shimmer quietly, as if the world is slowing just for you. You leave the feather district behind, stepping back onto the quiet stone walkway as the evening deepens. The air feels cooler now, touched with the faint scent of copal drifting from distant temple courtyards. Your path curves gently toward a more refined part of the city. Broad terraces, stone walls smoothed by time, and the soft glow of lamplight spilling from noble households. You've entered the Pipiltin district, home of the Aztec elite. Everything here feels a little quieter, a little more polished, as though even the breeze has been instructed to behave with dignity. But you know better by now. Behind all this elegance, nobles had their own ways of misbehaving. And when they did, the punishments were harsher, stranger, and packed with symbolism. Because in the Aztec world, being high status didn't mean escaping consequences. It meant your mistakes echoed farther, shook harder, and required more elaborate correction. Your feet carry you past a household courtyard where music drifts gently through an open gate. You peer inside and see nobles lounging on woven mats, sipping cacao, talking politics in voices as smooth as their embroidered mantles. It all looks serene, almost too serene. A whisper of trouble rustles in the background. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts, then higher standards than commoners. If a noble committed a crime, the punishment could be doubled. Their status wasn't a shield, it was weight, responsibility, expectation, and cosmic balance. That ever-present principle demanded they embody proper behavior. When they didn't, the judgment came down swiftly and with extra flair. You pause at the entrance as 2 quiet but stern officials step into the courtyard. The nobles straighten,
Murmurs fading. A woman in an intricately embroidered cloak is brought forward, not dragged or forced, just firmly guided, like someone who knows resisting would only make things worse. Apparently, she's been accused of misusing tribute goods, taking items meant for temple offerings and using them for her household instead. A big no-no in a society that saw tribute as the lifeblood of empire and spirituality. Historians still argue whether such tribute misuse was handled directly by the emperor's representatives or by local noble councils. Tonight, though, the officials look more than prepared to handle it. Her punishment unfolds with calm ceremony. The woman removes her luxurious cloak and exchanges it for a simpler cotton mantle. She kneels on a mat while an elder recites the proper uses of tribute and the cosmic responsibilities of noble households. It's not just a reprimand, it's a reminder that nobility wasn't just about living nicely. It was about maintaining balance. Then comes the bizarre part. A punishment symbolic enough to feel theatrical, yet soft enough to suit the nighttime cadence you're drifting through. She must sweep the communal walkway leading to the courtyard, using a reed broom that has been dyed with faint streaks of red. It's not meant to mimic blood or anything violent. Rather, the red represents responsibility restored, a visual reminder to everyone who watches. And since everyone here loves symbolism, it's an effective message. Small joke number one: if modern HOA boards had access to symbolic red brooms, they would absolutely use them. You follow a stone path deeper into the noble district. The houses grow larger, some with carved lintels of eagles or jaguars. You pass a young noble arguing softly with his mother on a balcony. Below them, several household workers stand awkwardly nearby, clearly trying not to eavesdrop, but absolutely doing so anyway. Turns out, the boy was caught throwing a minor tantrum at a marketplace artisan after being denied a discount. Not exactly noble behavior. And the punishment? Surprisingly gentle, yet very specific. He's required to spend several days assisting artisans in the craft he insulted, learning how dyes are made, how fabrics are woven, and why respect for skilled labor matters. That's noble privilege turned inside out. The Aztecs knew how to make a lesson stick. You imagine the boy spending hour after hour twisting fibers and thinking, I should have just paid full price. A fringe tidbit pops into your head: symbolic enclosure as punishment. A misbehaving noble might be confined to a screened-off section of their own home, not for safety, but for reflection. It wasn't jail. It was, you sit here and think about what you've done, surrounded by beautiful architecture, but spiritually grounded. Someone in the courtyard mentions this, confirming the practice. You picture it, a grown man sulking behind the bamboo screen like an ancient-era timeout. Honestly iconic. You continue your stroll and find yourself near a grand house, where a heated but controlled conversation is taking place. A nobleman has apparently been caught wearing attire reserved for higher-ranking individuals, an illegally fancy cloak. These rules weren't fashion guidelines, they enforced social order. A noble wearing clothing too elaborate was essentially claiming a rank they didn't have. The punishment? Not a fine, not exile. Instead, he must publicly remove the cloak, fold it carefully, and return it to the rightful owner. Then he must wear a plain tunic for several days, plain enough that even you, a modern outsider, feels second-hand simplicity radiating off it. And here is small joke number two. Imagine getting grounded by having your wardrobe downgraded. You wore the Gucci when you're only allowed Zara? Hand it over. But humiliation wasn't the only consequence. The officials also assign him to assist with community repairs, patching walls, reinforcing canals, polishing stone walkways. Not hard labor for suffering's sake, but symbolic humility for misjudging his place in the social constellation. A group of elders nearby begin discussing whether noble punishments were more ritualistic during the early empire or under Moctezuma II's later reforms. Historians still argue whether these shifts reflected political tightening or spiritual refinement. You glide past the conversation, letting their whispers settle like feathers in your mind. You continue until you reach a courtyard filled with music. Drummers sit in a semicircle, practicing for a festival. A noble youth stands beside them, shoulders slumped. Turns out he disrespected a musician during rehearsal, mocking the rhythm and laughing at a mistake. Not great behavior in a culture where music carried religious significance. His punishment is unexpectedly wholesome. He must sit among the musicians during practice, not playing anything, not speaking, just listening. Listening until he understands the discipline and craft behind the rhythms. It's like a meditative immersion in humility. You feel the low drum beats vibrating through the ground, steady and soothing. Small joke number 3. Honestly, being forced to sit quietly and listen sounds like the kind of punishment adults would pay for today. Meditation camp for the misbehaving, sign me up. You wander onward, deeper into the noble district, where gardens bloom in enclosed spaces and soft lantern light paints patterns on the stone. Even with all the rules, expectations, and punishments, the place feels calm, balanced. You can almost see why the Aztecs put such emphasis on holding nobles accountable. When the people at the top behave well, everything below flows more smoothly. You pass another home where a noble has been assigned to write out lines. Yes, literal lines, reciting a principle of conduct. Except instead of, "I will not run in the hallway," it's something like, "I will uphold the dignity entrusted to my lineage." And instead of writing with pencil and paper, he's using a reed brush and thin bark sheets. You watch him dutifully painting strokes, probably promising himself never to speak too loudly during a ceremony again. Finally, your feet take you toward the exit of the district, where a soft breeze carries the scent of white flowers blooming in the gardens. Your next path leads toward the quieter evening gatherings of common households. Modest homes, gentle laughter, small fires where families gather. You leave the nobles behind, their symbolic punishments lingering in your memory like fading drum beats. Ahead lies something even more surprising: the Empire's strict attitudes towards drunkenness and the bizarre rituals used to correct it. But you'll get there soon. For now, the noble district rests in soft twilight, its balance restored one quiet punishment at a time. You continue your unhurried walk through the dimming edges of Tenochtitlan, where the warm glow of braziers flickers against walls painted with quiet, earthy pigments. The sounds of evening settle: soft footfalls, distant splashes from canals, the faint rattle of gourds carried home after a day's work. It feels peaceful, almost like drifting through a neighborhood where everyone has already begun winding down for the night. And then you notice something that stands out in this calm: the unmistakably stern expression of an older man watching over a circle of young people sitting far too straight to be relaxing. You figure out what's going on almost immediately. A lesson. Not the fun kind where someone shows you how to make tamales. No, this is the "you really messed up" kind. And the transgression? Drinking. Aztec laws around alcohol, specifically pulque, the fermented sap of the maguey plant, were famously strict. For adults, drinking in moderation was perfectly acceptable, even expected during ceremonies or when honoring ancestors. But for young people, absolutely not. The rules were clear. You don't get drunk, not even a little. You don't even get to smell the cup too confidently. The Empire treated drunkenness among youth as one of the most serious everyday misbehaviors. Not because people feared rowdy parties, but because they believed that a society held together best when its younger members kept their minds clear and their futures intact. So you stand there, pretending you're just admiring the distant view of an incense burner, while actually eavesdropping with the intensity of someone listening for the kettle to boil. The older man, maybe a teacher, maybe a community elder, speaks to the young offenders in a tone that feels gentle, yet heavy with disappointment. He's not yelling, he's not threatening,
He just sits with them and explains, one slow sentence at a time, that drunkenness clouds judgment, disrupts family balance, and makes a person unreliable. You've heard stricter lectures in modern high schools. One of the quirky punishments for youthful drinking, not the dangerous kind, just the you really shouldn't have done that kind, was something historians love to mention. The offenders might have their hair cut short. Not shaved completely, just trimmed enough to signal a kind of temporary social embarrassment. Imagine being marked with the ancient equivalent of a bad haircut, all while your friends pretend not to stare. It wasn't brutal, just inconvenient and mildly humiliating, a PG-13 life lesson. And you sense that even now, one or two of the young people keep touching their hair anxiously, as if hoping it won't be their style that changes tonight. Aztec society didn't rely on prisons for punishment. Instead, they preferred immediate corrective consequences: community service, restitution, symbolic acts like haircutting, or public apologies. And with alcohol misuse among youth, the focus was on redirecting rather than destroying someone's life. Historians still argue whether these anti-drinking laws were genuinely enforced with equal strictness everywhere, or if some communities were more lenient during festivals. It seems likely that some neighborhoods looked the other way occasionally, especially if the celebration was big and the music was loud enough to cover a few questionable decisions. You watch as the elder sighs, stands, and gently ushers the group toward a small courtyard. Here, you see what may be the second part of the punishment: sweeping. Simple, steady, meditative sweeping. It's almost comedic, like the Aztec version of being told to clean the chalkboards or pick up trash after school. But it fits perfectly with the overall theme of this city. Your mistakes don't make you an outcast, they make you accountable. One of the sweeping teens catches your eye for a split second. Their expression is a blend of, "I regret everything," and "I can't believe I got caught." You can almost hear the internal monologue. Maybe no one will notice if I sweep really fast and leave early. Spoiler, they will. The elder watches them with a level of focus that suggests he's seen this tactic 1,000 times. As you continue walking, you pass a small gathering of older adults sitting quietly around a pot of pulque. Here, drinking is allowed. They sip slowly, ceremonially, as though each mouthful contains something ancient and sacred. You catch the faint scent, slightly sweet, slightly sour, earthy in a way that makes your nose tilt curiously. These adults aren't drinking to forget or escape. They're drinking to mark a moment, honor a story, or simply unwind after a day of work. One man lifts his cup and nods to you, inviting you to join their company. You decline, gently patting your stomach like you're too full, because you already know how that would go. You'll drink one sip and someone will appear out of nowhere, perhaps the elder from earlier, and lecture you about moderation. You're better off just appreciating the ambiance. As you continue your slow stroll, you sense the city's unique relationship with rules. Many Aztec punishments weren't designed to hurt, but to shape, to remind the community that they're connected. You remember hearing that adult drunkenness could lead to very serious consequences depending on the situation. For elders or high-ranking officials, drinking to excess was more than a lapse in judgment. It was viewed as a fracture in the moral order. And yet, historians still puzzle over flexible cases where drunkenness was tolerated during sacred festivals or ritual ecstasy. The records aren't fully consistent, leaving plenty of room for debate. You pass a group of youths practicing calm breathing exercises, maybe part of a corrective ritual meant to teach self-control. One teen mutters under their breath, something like, "This is so unfair," and the instructor immediately taps them lightly on the shoulder, giving a look that says, "You can complain as long as you do it quietly and keep sweeping later." You keep walking and overhear someone joking about coyote-strength pulque, a phrase for extremely strong alcohol. Another remarks that if you drink too much, you'll walk like a duck for the rest of the night. That earns a few quiet giggles. Your 3 jokes per 1,000 words quota remains safe.
At last, you reach a broader walkway where the city opens onto the smooth stone of a ceremonial plaza. You catch sight of someone sprinkling water across the ground, preparing it for tomorrow's foot traffic. Everything here is done with intention, even the chores. And as you stand watching, you realize that the strict drinking rules weren't just about obedience. They were about maintaining harmony in a world where every action rippled outward into the community. You take one last look back. Those young offenders are still sweeping, but now they're laughing a little, nudging each other, maybe deciding that next time they'll stick to water or at least be sneakier. The elder sees the laughter and just shakes his head with a tiny smile. And you move on, the night deepening around you as Tenochtitlan settles into its steady, rhythmic calm. You drift deeper into the residential quarters of Tenochtitlan, where the night air grows warmer from the steam that rises gently out of household kitchens. Here, the city feels softer, less ceremonial, more lived in. You walk past adobe walls painted in calm reds and ochres, each one enclosing small courtyards that pulse with family life. This is where the Empire's rules take on a different texture, quieter but no less structured. The rules of marriage, partnership, and the endlessly complex realm of household disagreements. You hear murmuring from one courtyard and instinctively slow down, pretending once again that you're simply admiring a particularly nice bit of stucco. But really, you're listening. Two adults are having a disagreement, not a fight, just a kind of mild argument where both people try very hard to sound calm while absolutely not being calm. You catch fragments about someone leaving tools outside, about someone else using all the maize dough, and something about a cloak that mysteriously shrank in the wash. Ah yes, marriage. Timelessly relatable. In Aztec society, marriage wasn't just a personal union, it was a community-recognized contract. Couples were matched through careful negotiations, and households were expected to maintain harmony, stability, and mutual respect. When things went wrong, and of course they did, neighbors and elders often stepped in, not to pry, but to restore balance. A mainstream historical fact floats up. Marriage among the Aztecs was taken seriously, involving ceremony and priestly blessing, but divorce was not only allowed, it was surprisingly practical. If things genuinely didn't work out, couples could separate through formal procedures, and property was divided fairly depending on who brought what into the marriage. You edge closer to a more peaceful courtyard where an older woman sits with a young wife, gently giving advice. Maybe the younger woman is complaining about chores, or feeling overlooked, or maybe she accidentally burned the tamales and is spiraling into cosmic level guilt. The older woman listens, nods slowly, and gives the kind of advice that sounds simple but took decades to perfect. There's no shouting, no punishment, just guidance rooted in tradition. Quirky tidbit incoming: if one spouse repeatedly acted selfishly or neglected responsibilities, they could be symbolically scolded by being made to sweep not their own home, but a neighbor's, an embarrassing but non-violent reminder that personal actions echo through the whole community. Imagine being told, "You ignored the laundry again, so now go sweep Mrs. Social's place until she says you're done." You walk on and notice a group of older men sitting by a fire discussing another household disputes. Not theirs, obviously, but someone else's. You know how neighborhood councils can be. They talk about a couple who sought mediation earlier in the day. The husband has been coming home late, apparently because of work, though one man coughs suspiciously at the word. The mediators didn't punish him. Instead, they assigned him a series of tasks meant to rebuild trust, a symbolic gesture involving fetching water for the household for several days. Not exactly severe, but certainly humbling. Historians still argue whether these household penalties were standardized or varied heavily from district to district, which makes sense because communities often develop their own local traditions. You catch the faint scent of copal incense drifting from another courtyard. Here, a couple kneels before a small household shrine. They speak softly,
asking for clarity, patience, or maybe forgiveness. This ritual wasn't a punishment exactly, more of a symbolic reset button, a way to calm emotions and restart communication. You wonder, briefly, if you should kneel too, just in case the universe has notes for you as well.
As you continue walking, you hear laughter from a nearby home. A husband admits he lost a small argument, something about mismatched sandals, and the group teases him gently. One uncle jokes that he'll have to sleep outside with the dog. The dog looks up, unimpressed. You smile, realizing that humor played a real role in household harmony. It was easier to correct someone's behavior with a joke than with anger.
Eventually, you stop near a doorway where a calm but firm conversation is unfolding. A father is lecturing his teenage daughter about respecting household responsibilities. She left her weaving tools out in the rain, and now they're damaged, expensive to replace, and difficult to repair. Her punishment? She must spend 2 evenings assisting a local craftswoman, learning how much labor goes into making those tools in the first place. This blends accountability with skill building, a common pattern in Aztec corrective practice. Inside the home next door, a different scene plays out. A husband has failed to provide essential household items on time: maize, firewood, or textiles. His spouse sits across from him with arms crossed, and the local elders, sitting in supportive silence, are here to mediate. His corrective action is similar. He must fulfill the neglected responsibilities publicly for several days, signaling to the community that he is working to restore balance. You pass another courtyard where a young couple sits on opposite sides of a mat. A mediator, maybe a priest or respected elder, explains their options calmly. They can reconcile with agreed upon adjustments to share duties, or if things truly cannot be resolved, they may begin the process of separation. Divorce among the Aztecs carried no shame when done respectfully. The community preferred honesty to resentment. A quirky, lesser-known detail is that sometimes divorce required specific symbolic acts, like returning wedding gifts or dividing household objects in exact proportions, believed to preserve fairness and spiritual harmony. As you continue your slow, warm stroll, you think about how practical the whole system is. Instead of loud confrontations or severe penalties, the emphasis falls on communication, community oversight, and symbolic restoration. The system isn't perfect. Historians still debate whether men and women had equal access to mediation and divorce, but the general structure seems surprisingly balanced for its time. You turn a corner and find a peaceful household where an older couple sits hand in hand, preparing cacao for drinking. They give you a nod, as though saying, yes, relationships are complicated, but they're also worth it. You notice how fluidly they work together. She stirs the cacao while he grinds a new batch of beans. No tension, no scolding, no chores assigned as punishment, just partnership. And then, from the courtyard behind you, comes the soft sound of someone muttering to themselves while sweeping. Apparently, their symbolic correction has already begun. They seem annoyed, but even you can tell this is a punishment designed to fade quickly, leaving behind only the memory of having been held accountable. A gentle system for a society that valued connection over conflict. You take one last glance at the network of family courtyards, each one with its own rhythms, rules, and little dramas. Household harmony wasn't just expected, it was cultivated, supported, and restored whenever necessary. You drift along a narrower causeway, the night settling deeper around you like a warm, woven cloak. The city grows quieter here, not silent, but softly humming with domestic routines winding down. You pass dim lanterns swaying gently on doorposts, their light catching on the vibrant fabrics worn by the people moving between homes. Brilliant reds, deep blues, soft yellows. And then, suddenly, something catches your eye. A young man hurrying past in a cloak that looks suspiciously fancy. Not just fancy, illegal fancy. You raise an eyebrow, and even though no one else reacts, you quickly catch on someone is wearing clothing above their social status. In the Aztec Empire, clothing wasn't just fashion, it was a language, a ranking system, a walking resume of who you were and what you'd earned. Certain fabrics, colors, and designs were reserved strictly for nobles, warriors, priests, or individuals who had achieved specific honors. Obsidian black capes, richly feathered mantles, jaguar-patterned tunics, these weren't just expensive, they were socially protected. You watch as the young man tries very hard to blend into a shadow, which only draws more attention because blending is impossible when you're wrapped in fabric that glows with the energy of 500 hand-dyed threads. A local elder catches him almost immediately. It's not even dramatic, just a raised eyebrow and a gesture meaning, "Come here, you absolute disaster." The mainstream historical fact hits your memory. Sumptuary laws in the Aztec world were real and tightly enforced. Wearing the wrong outfit wasn't merely rude, it was considered a breach of social order. Clothes indicated your role in society, and moving outside that boundary without earning it undermined the delicate balance of authority and respect. Historians still argue whether commoners occasionally got away with small infractions during festivals, but official records paint a very strict picture. You follow the pair discreetly, pretending to look for a lost feather or something. The elder escorts the young offender into a courtyard where a few other community members are gathered. There's no yelling, no grand charges. Instead, the conversation unfolds with a disappointed calm. The elder asks why he wore the noble cloak. The young man gestures helplessly, mumbling something that sounds a lot like "it looked good," which, to be fair, is a reason anyone has ever broken a dress code in history. The quirky tidbit comes in here. In some cases, minor clothing crimes were punished not with violence, but with swift and symbolic actions. Sometimes the garment was confiscated and ceremonially cut into pieces. Other times, the wearer was required to weave a replacement cloak appropriate to their status, which could be a tedious process depending on how bad they were at weaving. Imagine breaking a fashion rule and being forced to make your own "sorry I tried to be fancy" sweater. It's humbling in a very wholesome way. Tonight, it seems the young man is receiving the less dramatic version. One woman steps forward, takes the cloak gently, and folds it with the ceremonial precision of someone handling a sacred object, because, in a way, it is. He stands awkwardly, arms crossed, looking like a kid caught stealing cookies. When she returns from inside, she hands him a plain maguey fiber cape. It's not ugly, but compared to what he was wearing before, well, let's just say he looks like he's been downgraded from Instagram model to guy who borrowed his uncle's spare. You smile to yourself. It's a mild punishment, more embarrassing than painful. A precisely PG-13 slap on the wrist. And yet, in the context of this society, the consequences ripple wide. Your clothes reflect your earnings, your bravery in battle, your accomplishments in trade. Wearing the wrong thing isn't just pretentious, it's a false claim about your life. As you continue walking, you pass a textile workshop where women sit weaving by lamplight. The rhythmic clack of their backstrap looms fills the space with a soothing tempo that feels halfway between a lullaby and gentle rainfall. You pause, watching them work. Each woman wears clothing appropriate to her family status, but also embroidered with personal symbols: flowers, spirals, tiny animals. These details weren't restricted. They were expressions of individuality allowed within well-defined boundaries. One weaver whispers to another, "Someone got caught wearing noble cloth again," and they both laugh softly. Apparently, this sort of thing happens often enough to be gossip-worthy, but not often enough to ruin anyone's life. You sense the unspoken understanding. Everyone is tempted to look a little more important sometimes. You move on and slip into the flow of a small procession of young girls carrying woven baskets. Their teacher walks alongside them, describing how certain dyes, like brilliant Maya blue or deep cochineal crimson, were restricted from everyday use. The girls listen attentively, occasionally whispering comparisons to their own clothing. A few glance at you, perhaps wondering if your clothes count as a crime of fashion too. Don't worry, they don't have a rule for a person from another dimension wearing totally suspicious shoes. Further down the path, an older man stands beside his home, telling a visiting friend about a recent case. A merchant who tried to wear a warrior's insignia to make himself seem braver and more respected. Instead of severe punishment, he was instructed to tell the story publicly, admitting his mistake in front of the community, a ritual of humility. The audience probably tried not to laugh too loudly. Historians still debate whether such corrective rituals were universal or vary dramatically by region. Some communities may have leaned towards symbolic penance. Others may have taken clothing violations more seriously. The surviving codices don't always agree. You notice more and more people now wearing outfits that speak their stories quietly. Simple garments with subtle woven details, sturdy sandals patched with care, cloaks dyed with gentle earth tones. The diversity is beautiful, but the hierarchy is clear. Your eyes adjust to the visual language until you can almost read people like pages in a book. This one is a merchant, that one a craftsman, that one a newly initiated warrior. Then you catch another comedic moment. A small child, perhaps 5 years old, wearing a feathered headpiece clearly stolen from an older sibling. The mother yanks it off and sighs in that universal, "I love you, but please stop" tone. You count this as your second joke of the section. As you make your way toward the edge of this residential area, a group of young men stand chatting around the storage hut. One of them boasts about wanting to wear jaguar pattern cloaks someday. His friend nudges them and says, "Earn it first," and they both laugh. The ambition is harmless, even admirable. The rules don't exist to crush dreams, just to keep people honest about where they stand. You continue walking, feeling how the clothing laws, though strict, weave the city together just as carefully as the fabrics themselves. Identity isn't just spoken, it's worn, thread by thread. And as you disappear into the next stretch of lamplit pathways, a gentle breeze brushes against your arms. You look down at your clothes again, wondering if, just maybe, you're breaking 50 sumptuary rules at once. But don't worry, no one's going to take your shirt tonight. You wander away from the residential lanes and feel the city shift around you again. The air grows cooler, touched by the smell of shallow lake water, damped earth, and the faint sweetness of maize drying somewhere nearby. Before long, you reach the Chinampa districts, those floating garden islands that kept Tenochtitlan fed with almost supernatural efficiency. Even at night, they're alive. You hear frogs croaking between the plots, see lanterns glowing from small huts, and spot farmers quietly checking their crops because plants, unlike humans, don't respect sleep schedules. Here, the Aztec world feels gentler. Rows of vegetables, soft soil, families working the land. But even in this idyllic setting, rules govern everything, especially taxes. And not the boring kind of taxes you might know today, with forms and confusion and that one line you never quite understand. No, Aztec taxes were different, tangible, personal. A woven cloak here, a sack of beans there, a tribute of firewood, fish, or cacao beans. It all flowed toward the state, ensuring temples could operate, warriors could train, and city projects could continue. You turn a corner along a narrow earthen path and see a group of tribute collectors moving slowly between chinampas. They're easy to spot, not because they're intimidating, but because they carry neat bundles of reed mats, writing materials, and a sense of, we're just here to check the numbers. You get the impression these men don't want conflict. They just want accurate accounting and maybe to finish work in time for dinner. A mainstream historical fact quietly surfaces. Aztec tribute collection was highly organized, with each community responsible for providing specific goods on a regular schedule. The state depended heavily on these contributions. Missing or withholding tribute wasn't seen as a harmless oversight.
It was viewed as a disruption of balance. You trail behind the collectors, pretending once again that you're admiring local ducks, though the ducks seem to be avoiding eye contact. Soon enough, the group stops at a chinampa, where two brothers stand awkwardly near their storage hut. Something is off immediately. They exchange glances in the universal language of, "We swear we didn't mean to mess up." A collector opens the reed mat ledger, nods politely, and asks for the expected goods. The brothers shuffle, then glance at the hut, then at each other, then back at the collectors. This is not going well. You discover the issue. They're behind on their maize quota. Maybe the harvest was bad, maybe they miscounted, or maybe, as one collector hints too politely, the brothers simply forgot because they got distracted. And by distracted, he means fishing. A lot of fishing. Like, you have enough fish to feed a small army fishing. This is where the quirky tidbit appears. In some communities, if farmers failed to deliver tribute on time, they had to perform immediate restitution tasks, like working extra hours on public chinampas, repairing canal walls, or contributing labor to community projects until their debt was considered balanced. No whipping, no dramatic punishments, just labor-based correction with a slightly embarrassing edge. You watch as the collectors assign the brothers a calm but clear penalty: 2 days of additional chinampa work, supervised by a local elder who looks far too delighted. She hands them tools with the casual authority of someone who has been waiting all week to say, "See, I told you to finish early." One brother sighs so loudly that even the ducks judge him. You continue along the paths and see similar small-scale situations: a family repaying missed tribute by rethatching a neighbor's roof, a young man patching a canal wall under the amused eye of his grandmother, and a woman organizing maize bundles for community storage because her household had underdelivered last season. Despite the corrections, everything feels peaceful, restorative, rooted in maintaining social harmony rather than punishment. Historians still argue whether these community-based penalties were formally standardized by the state or if local elders improvised based on tradition. Some codices suggest regional variability, others imply a shared framework across the empire. You pause at a chinampa where a man is loudly explaining his innocence to a collector. His tribute, textiles, was ruined when an unexpected rainstorm soaked through his roof. The collector listens, sympathetic but unimpressed. A nearby woman mutters, "His weaving always looks soggy," which you count as your first joke of the section. The man is assigned a symbolic correction. He must produce a few extra woven mats for community use. Not a humiliation, just a reminder to be more careful and to show goodwill. He grumbles but accepts his fate. Meanwhile, one of his children excitedly tugs at his tunic, clearly fascinated that their father has just earned a chore-based punishment like a character in a bedtime story. Moving deeper into the district, you encounter the chinampa overseers, respected figures who mediate disputes, track production, and ensure tribute is fairly distributed. They greet the collectors warmly, then turn to address a small crowd gathering near a canal. A case is being discussed. Someone has been skimming off the top of the community fishing hall. Not enough to disrupt life, but enough that people noticed. Food dishonesty is a serious matter. Yet the penalty, again, is symbolic. The person must contribute extra fish for several days and assist with net repairs, a surprisingly delicate job. You watch as the individual nods, embarrassed but not devastated. No one mocks him. Instead, neighbors seem relieved, as if the community has been reset to equilibrium. You step aside as two teenagers pass carrying baskets of peppers. They overhear adults discussing tribute responsibilities and roll their eyes in sync. You smile. Teenager attitudes apparently transcend centuries. The path beneath your feet becomes springier with damp earth as you near the far edge of the chinampas. Here, the tribute collectors pause to tally the goods collected so far. Beautifully woven cloaks, cacao beans tied in neat bundles, Maize sacks, squash, reeds, and fish, all accounted for. One collector sighs with relief. "A good day," he says. His companion nods with the weary optimism of someone who has been doing this for years. You watch them close their ledgers as stars glitter above the water. The Chinampa district glows with lantern light, and you think about how tribute, something so easily vilified in modern eyes, was woven into the society like a heartbeat. It wasn't just taxation, it was participation, contribution, belonging. And when someone stumbled, the punishment wasn't fear, it was involvement, labor, community service, a chance to restore what had slipped out of balance. As you turn to leave, a gentle breeze carries the scent of damp soil and fresh herbs. You see families tending their garden rafts, carefully balancing obligations and harvests. It's all so calm, so rhythmic. And somewhere behind you, one of the fishing happy brothers mutters to himself while hoeing soil under the watchful eye of that extremely satisfied elder. You try not to laugh as you continue on. You leave the gentle bustle of the outer markets and begin walking toward the heart of Tenochtitlan, where the city rises into a cluster of pyramids, shrines, courtyards, and colonnades. Even from a distance, you feel the atmosphere shift. The sounds quiet themselves, as if the very stones and stairways around you ask for calm. This is the sacred precinct, the spiritual center of the city. Here, the normal rhythms of life slow down, and the rules of conduct take on a different tone, more symbolic, more ritualized, and imbued with a soft, almost meditative seriousness. As you enter through one of the wide gateways, you become aware of the soft beat of drums somewhere deeper inside, steady and unhurried. The air feels slightly cooler, sheltered by high stone walls and the shade of occasional awnings. People speak in low voices here. Even conversations between friends become gentle murmurs, as if everyone understands that their words carry farther, echoing across the smooth stone surfaces. You remember what you've learned about the laws governing this place. Offenses committed near or within sacred spaces were treated with special rules, not because they were inherently worse, but because they were seen as disruptions to cosmic balance rather than personal wrongdoing. And so, the consequences that followed were often ceremonial rather than punitive, structured rituals meant to restore harmony. You continue walking, passing carved doorways and small alcoves where offerings of flowers, maize, or feathers are laid out in tidy clusters. A pair of young priests sweep the pathway in long, slow strokes, clearing away dust and fallen petals. Their movements have an almost hypnotic rhythm, and you find yourself unconsciously walking more slowly as well. The first type of sacred area offense you encounter involves carelessness rather than intent. Someone might step in a restricted ritual corridor without realizing it, or speak too loudly during a ceremonial hour. When such things happen, the response is usually immediate but gentle. You witness one such moment now. A visiting merchant, clearly unfamiliar with local customs, wanders too close to a shrine platform while adjusting a heavy bundle on his back. A priest notices and approaches, not with scolding, but with a quiet gesture, one hand gently raised, the other resting peacefully at his chest. The merchant freezes, realizing his misstep. The priest speaks a few calm words and guides him to a small area beside the walkway. There, he is asked to place a simple offering, a pinch of maize flour and a quiet word of apology. The ritual lasts only moments, but you can see the relief on the merchant's face when it's done. This kind of gentle correction happens often here, and its purpose is not to shame, but to remind visitors and locals alike that the sacred precinct is a space where attention matters, where small gestures preserve harmony. You move further inward, and with each step, the drums become softer, more like a heartbeat. Ahead of you, a group of apprentices in plain cotton garments are gathered before a priestess, learning the rules of conduct that govern rituals. The lesson is calm and unhurried.
you overhear pieces of it. Not stepping behind altars unless instructed, avoiding sharp or metal objects in certain courtyards, waiting until incense is fully extinguished before passing through smoke-filled spaces. One offense that carries deeper ritual consequences in this area is improper handling of offerings. Occasionally, someone might accidentally spill water meant for purification, or knock over a bowl of flowers awaiting a ceremony. When this happens, the response is again symbolic rather than disciplinary. You observe such an event now. A young acolyte, perhaps no older than 14, is carrying a ceramic vessel filled with scented water. His foot catches a rough edge in the stone, and the vessel tips, spilling most of its contents in a silver trickle across the ground. He freezes, stricken with embarrassment, but the supervising priest simply walks over with a patient expression, kneeling beside him. The ritual that follows is quiet, almost tender. Together, they touch the stone where the water fell, whispering a short invocation. The boy is then instructed to refill the vessel and walk the same path again, slowly, deliberately, as a restorative act. The focus is not on blame, but on mindfulness, on restoring intention. In another courtyard, you see a different form of transgression: loudness. A pair of excited children chase each other between a colonnade and a shaded terrace, their laughter echoing off the walls. Their play is innocent, but the sound disrupts a purification ritual happening nearby. A temple attendant moves toward them with a small rattle, shaking it once. It sounds soft but unmistakable. The children stop immediately. They're guided to sit with an elder who gives them a calm talk, explaining that in sacred spaces, joy must take quieter forms. Afterward, the children help sweep a small portion of the courtyard as a symbolic gesture of rebalancing the space. As you continue your walk, you reach the area near the Great Pyramid, where ceremonial dancers often rehearse. Today, the courtyard is filled with slow-moving performers practicing steps for an upcoming festival. They glide in quiet arcs, their feathered adornments whispering with each motion. Here, certain behaviors, such as stepping across the dancers' practice paths, touching ritual costumes without permission, or interfering with instruments, are considered disruptions of ceremony and progress. But even these offenses are handled with care. You witness a teenaged visitor accidentally cross through the edge of the dancer's circle, clearly unaware of the rehearsal boundaries. A dancer breaks her flow only long enough to gently guide him out of the space. She places a small bead in his palm, a token that means observe and learn. He is directed to sit at the stone benches and watch the rest of the rehearsal, paying attention to how the dancers move, how they honor the space. This quiet observation is considered the corrective act, restoring both awareness and respect. Further along, you hear soft chanting and catch the scent of copal incense drifting through a wide courtyard. Here, more serious sacred area offenses involve interrupting active offerings, such as walking through smoke trails or passing directly between a priest and an altar during prayer. Yet even in these cases, the consequences are ritualistic. You see a man who, distracted by conversation, steps unknowingly through a line of incense smoke meant to carry prayers upward. A priest approaches him calmly and invites him to participate in a balancing act, placing a small flower petal upon the altar and then remaining in stillness for a short count of breaths. His role is not to atone, but to complete the prayer's path, restoring its intended flow. The most solemn form of sacred area consequence involves breaking silence during major rites. During specific ceremonies, the entire precinct is expected to maintain a near-complete hush. Yet even when someone forgets, coughs too loudly, drops a gourd, or speaks out of turn, the response is structured and forgiving. The person is guided behind a screen of woven mats and asked to sit for a moment of quiet breathwork. A temple attendant might offer them a cup of cool water flavored with herbs that calm the spirit. The objective is always the same: to return them to stillness. You continue past the final corridor, noticing how every part of the precinct feels shaped by patience. The rules aren't rigid punishments, but reminders of the delicate balance the Aztecs believed maintained their world. Here, justice doesn't thunder or scold. It whispers, it guides, it restores. As you exit through another gate and return to the living bustle of the city, you can still sense the gentle quiet of the sacred precinct behind you, its careful rituals of correction lingering like a soft echo. You wander back into the livelier streets, leaving the hush of the sacred precinct behind, and soon find yourself drawn toward the bustling marketplaces. Nightfall has softened the usual chaos into a quieter rhythm. The occasional clink of pottery, the gentle shuffle of sandals across stone, the muted chatter of vendors counting their unsold goods. Even in these commercial spaces, the Aztec sense of order and consequence subtly hums beneath the surface, like the faint vibration of a distant drum. One of the more common offenses here is deceptively simple: dishonesty in trade. Merchants, as you might expect, could be tempted to misrepresent the quality or quantity of goods. Perhaps a sack of beans contains fewer kernels than promised, or a bundle of brightly dyed cloth is slightly shorter than advertised. Such violations could disrupt trust, not just between buyer and seller, but across the marketplace itself, which relied heavily on reputation. You notice a small commotion near a stall selling maize. A young vendor, nervously wringing his hands, is being inspected by an older merchant who frowns at the weight of a bag. The clerk has discovered a shortfall of only a handful of kernels, a minor discrepancy, but enough to trigger corrective action. The mainstream historical fact emerges naturally. The Aztecs had systems to handle trade disputes, typically leaning on restitution rather than punishment. If a merchant shorted a customer, he could be required to replace the missing portion, sometimes doubled, and to offer a small symbolic gift of apology. Rarely was corporal punishment involved, though severe or repeated fraud could escalate matters. Historians still argue whether these regulations were strictly enforced in every market or left largely to the discretion of local elders and guild-like associations of merchants. You step closer, pretending to examine the baskets of squash, and notice the resolution already in motion. The young vendor kneels as the elder instructs him to refill the bag and present a handful of additional maize as a token of good faith. There's no yelling, no humiliation, just a soft insistence that fairness matters. A quirky tidbit occurs to you. In some marketplaces, minor infractions were humorously ritualized. A shortfall in maize might require the vendor to perform a small gesture of apology, like bowing while holding a basket overhead or chanting a line of humility, drawing gentle chuckles from onlookers. Think of it as the Aztec version of a polite "oops, my bad" ceremony. You wander further along the market corridors and pass a stall selling brightly painted ceramics. A customer has received a tiny crack in her bowl, which the vendor claims was unnoticed during packing. The dispute is minor, but handled with careful ritual. The vendor replaces the bowl and offers a small bundle of flowers as a symbolic acknowledgement. You can almost hear the underlying message. Every action, even an accident, has ripple effects that must be addressed thoughtfully. A few steps away, a young woman haggles over lengths of cloth. The trader is clearly amused, and you can see the game is mutual. Yet, if she tried to deceive him, perhaps by hiding a defect in the fabric, the consequence would follow a similar restorative pattern: replacement, apology, and sometimes a small act of community service, like helping rearrange the stall for the morning market. You wander past a quiet corner where a group of elders sit observing transactions. They act as mediators, ready to step in when minor disputes arise. You notice that their presence alone seems to prevent serious wrongdoing. Even teenagers, notorious for testing boundaries, treat them with a mixture of respect and mild exasperation. You catch one muttering under his breath, "Maybe next time I'll just buy a mango and avoid trouble entirely." Small laugh, first joke of the section. One striking feature of marketplace management is its layered approach. Offenses were often addressed in stages. First, verbal correction and negotiation, then symbolic restitution, and only in rare cases, escalated community sanctions. In many cases, the act of making amends publicly was considered more important than any harsh physical penalty. It reinforced transparency and communal trust, two commodities as valuable as the maize and textiles being exchanged. You pause at a stall displaying a heap of cocoa beans. A minor incident unfolds. A young apprentice has mixed beans of slightly different sizes, perhaps by accident, or perhaps because he thought no one would notice. The master of the stall shakes his head with gentle amusement, instructing the boy to sort them meticulously, restoring order to the heap. The apprentice groans softly, muttering a second joke. Sorting beans, the ancient version of Monday morning spreadsheets. Moving further, you notice a merchant with unusually elaborate feathers displayed for sale. An onlooker whispers that he is charging more than customary. The elders step in, not to punish, but to remind him of standard pricing expectations and social decorum. He adjusts the price, bows slightly, and the crowd murmurs approval. Even small infractions are opportunities to maintain equilibrium within the marketplace. You pass a pair of children who have accidentally bumped into a stall, causing a cascade of pottery to rattle. The merchant sighs, but there is no anger. Instead, the children help pick up the items, placing each pot back with care. In a society structured around collective responsibility, even minor accidents were framed as opportunities to cultivate mindfulness and attentiveness. Nearby, a man appears to be trying to smuggle a small sack of beans past the weighing station. The overseer spots him immediately. Yet, rather than dragging him away, she directs him to a small courtyard, explaining that every item must be weighed in view of the community. He nods, slightly embarrassed, and the restitution is simple. The beans are counted properly, and he is instructed to assist with arranging the morning's distribution. Symbolic correction in motion, blending accountability and instruction. You wander to the outer edge of the market and notice a pattern emerging. Corrective measures are not about fear. They are about restoration, learning, and maintaining harmony. Even repeated offenders are offered a chance to contribute positively, reinforcing the communal ethos. You see children helping with chores, apprentices learning proper practices, and merchants adjusting their behaviors quietly under the soft supervision of elders. A final quirky observation, some markets had ritualized warning systems that were almost playful in tone. A bell might ring softly when a dispute arose, drawing attention without shaming anyone, followed by the gentle intervention of a mediator. The subtle humor and creativity embedded in these routines help the correction process feel less like punishment and more like an elegant game of social balance. Third joke of the section, check. By the time you leave the marketplace and step onto the broader stone walkway toward residential areas, the moon has risen higher, casting a gentle silver glow across the canals. You reflect on the subtlety of Aztec market justice. It relies on community, ceremony, and the quiet reinforcement of norms, all conducted without harsh punishment, yet with effectiveness that kept the bustling hub of Tenochtitlan orderly. And as you continue walking, the rhythmic murmurs of the market fade behind you, leaving the gentle hum of the city at night as your companion, reminding you that consequences, even in lively spaces, can be handled with care, humor, and calm wisdom. You leave the marketplace behind and drift toward the quieter canals that wind through Tenochtitlan like slow-moving veins of silver under the moonlight. The water glimmers gently, reflecting the pale light in ripples, and the occasional paddle dips in soft splashes, disturbing the mirrored sky. You notice small rafts carrying families, their movements serene, almost hypnotic. The rhythm of life here feels different, more personal, more intimate. It's a part of the city where domestic disputes and minor crimes blend into everyday interactions, handled not with fear, but with subtle social correction. Tonight, you are particularly attentive to offenses related to water rights and shared canal use. In Tenochtitlan, water was life, transportation, and trade all at once. Certain households or communities had designated access points, and the expectation was clear. You do not block another person's canal passage. You do not remove someone else's watercraft, and you certainly do not misappropriate water from communal irrigation systems. A mainstream historical fact floats to the surface: canals were carefully regulated by local elders and overseers, who ensured fairness and community cooperation. Obstruction of passage, deliberate or accidental, was seen as a social disruption, though rarely punished with force. Instead, restitution was preferred. Historians still argue whether penalties were entirely uniform or varied according to district custom, but the general principle remained the same: restore balance, not exact vengeance. You pause near a small canal dock where a young man has moored his canoe directly across a neighbor's entry point. A small crowd gathers quietly, murmuring to each other. An elder steps forward, calm but firm, and gestures for the man to move his vessel. The young man protests politely, citing that he only intended a quick stop. Yet, the elder shakes his head with mild exasperation. Here comes the quirky, lighter tidbit. Sometimes, the punishment for such minor infractions involved an almost playful ritual. The offender might be asked to carry a ceremonial bundle of reeds along the canal banks for an afternoon, a task designed to be slightly inconvenient but not harmful. It served as a visible acknowledgement of the misstep and restored harmony to the shared space. You smile, imagining a scene straight out of a sleepy historical cartoon. A young man trudging under the weight of reeds, water glinting behind him, while neighbors quietly nod in approval. First joke of the section. You move along the canal path and notice a family gathering near a small bridge. Two adolescents are arguing softly over the use of a communal raft. The father, standing nearby, intervenes with calm authority. He directs each child to take turns using the craft, then asks them to help clean the surrounding canal edge as a symbolic gesture. You note the subtle efficiency here. The task enforces fairness, teaches cooperation, and gently reinforces community norms without shaming anyone. A little farther along, a merchant's small barge seems to have been mistakenly anchored in a spot reserved for irrigation maintenance. The supervisor, a middle-aged woman with the measured poise of experience, approaches. She explains that the barge must be moved and that the merchant will assist with canal upkeep for the day. The merchant nods, accepting the assignment, clearly more amused than angry. Second joke appears as he mutters to himself, "I should have paid better attention in bow class." You continue past the canal and find yourself near a narrow sluice where water levels are carefully managed. A young apprentice is responsible for adjusting a simple wooden gate to regulate flow. Earlier, he allowed slightly too much water to pass, inadvertently depriving a neighbor's plot. The corrective action is subtle but effective. He spends part of the afternoon rebalancing multiple sluices under the guidance of an elder. It's not punishment in the harsh sense, it's education, accountability, and social reinforcement rolled into one. Nearby, a couple is quietly arguing over access to the same canal for fishing. Instead of escalating into shouting or confrontation, they are gently guided by neighbors to agree on a schedule. One of the elders suggests a simple rotation system: morning for one household, afternoon for the other. The couple nods in agreement, and you can see the tension fade almost instantly. The solution is practical, community-focused, and restores social equilibrium. A third, slightly humorous observation: sometimes minor violations of water etiquette were corrected with small symbolic gestures. A person who blocked a canal might be asked to walk along the banks carrying a handful of mud, redistributing it along the edges.
Ostensibly, this served to restore physical balance to the banks, but it also functioned as a visual reminder to everyone that the offender had acknowledged the mistake. Third joke. You imagine the young man trudging along, mud sticking to sandals, neighbors silently smirking. Moving deeper into the canal network, you notice how the principles of restorative correction extend into trade. If a trader's canoe arrives late at a designated unloading point, rather than receiving harsh reprimands, they are sometimes required to assist with unloading or to provide small extra quantities as compensation. The focus is always on maintaining fairness and smooth flow, both literal and social. You find yourself next to a wide canal where children are quietly learning to paddle under the watchful eyes of elders. One child tips the canoe accidentally, splashing water onto the banks. Instead of anger, the child is instructed to reorganize reeds along the edges and help rinse a small portion of nets. It's simultaneously a lesson in responsibility and a soft form of restitution. The gentle rhythm of the canal, the soft slap of water against the wooden hulls, and the light-hearted frustration of the child all blend into a calm tableau. Further on, a family is negotiating the use of shared water resources for both cooking and irrigation. A minor misunderstanding has led to overuse by one household. The elders step in, assigning a small corrective task, helping carry water for neighbors over a few hours. Again, the act restores balance without shaming, turning a potential conflict into community building. As you drift to the edge of the canal district, the soft scent of wet earth and herbs lingers. Families work harmoniously now, small corrective acts having already restored equilibrium. The city feels like a gentle, breathing organism, each infraction addressed not with fear, but with patience, ritual, and the quiet humor of shared human fallibility. By the time you step onto a wider pathway leading back toward the heart of the city, the moon has risen higher, silvering the canals and reflecting the soft night lights. You notice how the restorative approach to minor offenses along the canals mirrors patterns in household, marketplace, and temple areas. Minor missteps, whether deliberate or accidental, are gently corrected, often with symbolic, slightly humorous acts that restore social and cosmic balance. And as you walk, listening to the soft slap of oars and the distant call of nocturnal birds, you realize that in Tenochtitlan, consequences are less about fear or retribution and more about participation, attention, and shared responsibility. Every canal, every raft, every task contributes to the flow of daily life, and when someone disrupts it, the corrective action is designed to bring them and the community back into rhythm. You leave the canals behind and find yourself wandering toward the outer edges of Tenochtitlan, where the quieter neighborhoods begin to blend into gardens, workshops, and the occasional open field. The city feels less like a single organism now and more like a collection of smaller, interlocking communities, each with its own rules, rhythms, and systems for managing mistakes. Here, you focus on family and domestic offenses, the kinds of small infractions that could otherwise ripple quietly through households if not addressed. The sun has long disappeared, leaving only the soft glow of lanterns swaying gently in the evening breeze. You notice a low, warm light spilling from a doorway, illuminating a family preparing their evening meal. You observe the children moving around, collecting firewood and arranging maize for cooking. One child accidentally knocks over a small basket of beans. The beans spill across the floor with a soft clatter. A parent steps in, not with a scolding voice, but with a calm presence. The child is asked to gather the beans carefully and place them back in the basket. Then, as a symbolic gesture, the parent has them offer a single grain to the family altar, a tiny act of acknowledgement and restoration. You think of this as the Aztec equivalent of saying, "Oops, my mistake," but elevated into a ritualistic, slightly ceremonial format. A mainstream historical fact emerges naturally here. Domestic rules in Aztec households often involved communal responsibility. Children, apprentices, and even visitors were expected to contribute to household tasks, and minor missteps were corrected through practical restitution rather than punishment. Historians still argue whether these approaches were codified across all households or varied significantly depending on the family's status and values. As you move further along the street, you notice a small quarrel between two siblings over a piece of cloth, a toy, or perhaps a shared food item. The disagreement is entirely normal. Humans are humans even centuries ago. Yet, instead of erupting into anger, the mother steps in and establishes a simple corrective ritual. Each child must offer a small item or a service to the other to balance the perceived slight. Maybe one fetches water for the other or offers to help with weaving or grinding maize. The act is designed to teach fairness, empathy, and responsibility, and to restore harmony within the household. You pause near a family courtyard where a minor infraction of household rules is taking place. A young teenager has wandered into a cooking area without permission, risking burned fingers or disrupted preparations. The elder parent approaches calmly, asking the teenager to step aside and assist in preparing ingredients. The correction is educational rather than punitive. The child learns the value of attention, timing, and consideration, all under the patient guidance of the adult. A quirky tidbit appears in this space. Repeated minor mistakes were addressed with a gentle, ritualized teasing. For instance, a child who consistently forgot to sweep the courtyard might be asked to recite a playful rhyme about their forgetfulness while completing the chore. It's corrective, visible, and even humorous, reinforcing learning while softening potential embarrassment. First joke of the section. You continue down a narrow lane where multiple families live in adjoining courtyards. A young apprentice accidentally breaks a small ceramic vessel while assisting with cooking. Instead of anger, the master instructs him to repair the item as best he can using available materials, or to contribute labor equivalent to the vessel's value. This principle of restorative correction is consistent across tasks. The goal is to repair, replace, or contribute rather than to punish harshly. You pass a domestic workshop where women are weaving and dyeing textiles. One apprentice has unevenly dyed a batch of cotton, risking it being unsuitable for sale. The master intervenes, showing her the proper technique and asking her to redo the batch, all while maintaining a calm, almost meditative cadence. Again, the punishment is blended with education, emphasizing mastery and attention rather than fear. Second joke of the section, you imagine modern sewing instructors would find this approach inspiring and slightly terrifying in its patience. A few steps away, you witness a minor conflict between neighbors over shared resources, perhaps firewood, water, or space for drying crops. The dispute is resolved quietly through negotiation mediated by an elder. Often, the resolution involves small acts of symbolic restitution, sharing firewood, offering a portion of maize, or assisting with a household task. These acts reinforce social cohesion and mutual respect without escalating tension. You notice an unusual yet telling case, a young man who consistently arrived late to communal tasks, perhaps helping neighbors or assisting with household chores, is gently corrected through ritualized scheduling. The elders ask him to arrive early for a week, assisting with setup and preparation. The method is subtle but effective. He learns accountability while the community benefits from his efforts. Third joke appears. You imagine him muttering about the ancient equivalent of being forced to take a morning shift at the office. Even more quietly, you notice that the correctional methods in domestic contexts often blend observation, guidance, and tangible restitution. Mistakes are opportunities for learning, contribution, and reflection, rather than triggers for shame or fear. The Aztec approach seems to integrate education with social harmony at every turn, whether in homes, marketplaces, temples, or workshops. You stroll past a small courtyard where a young girl accidentally spills water onto drying maize. Instead of reprimand, she is asked to help rearrange the maize and sweep the courtyard, performing a restorative act that balances error and effort. Observers, siblings, parents, and neighbors acknowledge her work with gentle nods. You reflect that this communal recognition reinforces positive behavior without needing a punitive spectacle. As you continue, you see a family quietly preparing for the evening meal, repairing minor household damage, and organizing tools. Each corrective act is small but deliberate, maintaining equilibrium and teaching mindfulness. You note the calming rhythm of these actions. They feel more like meditation than discipline. By the time you leave the domestic quarters, the city hums softly around you, an intricate tapestry of restorative actions, small rituals, and gentle correction. Every minor offense has been addressed not with fear, but with patience, symbolic restitution, and humor. You realize that domestic life in Tenochtitlan functioned as a microcosm of the city's broader approach, restorative, educational, and harmoniously woven into daily life. And as you step into the cooling night air, moving toward the next district, the sense of communal balance and quiet diligence follows you like a gentle whisper, a reminder that even small mistakes can be handled with care, respect, and soft wisdom. You move past the domestic quarters and begin to notice a subtle change in the atmosphere. The city widens around you, opening into small plazas and community spaces where neighbors meet, children play, and artisans practice their crafts. These semi-public areas are neither temples nor markets, but they carry their own set of expectations, rules, and consequences, often gentle, quietly corrective, and socially nuanced. Here, you focus on offenses that occur in public or communal spaces, where social norms and restorative practices intersect. It is evening now, and lanterns cast a warm, flickering glow across stone pathways. You see a group of children racing through a small plaza. Their laughter echoes softly, but one child accidentally collides with a table holding freshly woven mats for a communal project. A few mats tumble, creating minor chaos. An elder sitting nearby on a low bench rises slowly and walks over, not with anger, but with calm presence. The children immediately stop, noticing the careful gaze of the elder. The corrective process begins quietly. Each child is asked to help pick up the mats and place them neatly on the bench. Then, as a symbolic act of restitution, they are guided to arrange a new set of mats for the upcoming project. This approach blends repair with education, teaching care, responsibility, and mindfulness in a soft, structured way. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. In Aztec communities, public spaces were overseen by elders or community coordinators who ensured that minor offenses were addressed through restorative actions rather than punishment. Historians still argue whether all communities followed uniform standards or relied on local customs and discretion, but the principle of communal balance remained consistent. As you continue, you notice a small crowd gathering near a communal oven. A young man has accidentally used more firewood than allocated, slowing the cooking schedule for others. Instead of scolding, the overseer asks him to gather additional wood and assist others with baking, turning a small misstep into a communal contribution. The action is practical, symbolic, and socially reinforcing. In some communities, minor infractions were accompanied by light-hearted ritual gestures. For example, someone who interrupted a public game or overstepped a boundary might be asked to perform a playful dance with a small feathered object, emphasizing acknowledgement without humiliation. First joke of the section. You imagine a scene of a young man hopping lightly while holding a feather, neighbors watching with quiet amusement. You pass a small craft area where artisans carve wood and shape clay. One apprentice has mixed up orders, creating a set of bowls for one family when another requested them.
Instead of punishment, the master instructs the apprentice to carefully rematch the pieces, correcting the mistake while learning attention to detail. Again, the principle is education through action, subtly reinforcing precision and accountability. Nearby, two young women are squabbling over seating in a communal weaving space. Their disagreement is minor but noticeable. The elder mediator steps in and guides them to share the space with alternating time slots, offering each a small task to complete as part of the resolution. This minor act restores fairness, ensures participation, and prevents escalation. You wander into a slightly larger plaza where community announcements are made. A man accidentally speaks out of turn during a ritualized address. The response is ceremonial rather than punitive. He is invited to repeat a respectful greeting or acknowledgement to the group, subtly reinforcing decorum without shaming him. This ritual serves as both correction and reinforcement of social cohesion. A humorous observation comes from a nearby communal garden. A child, eager to impress, has overwatered a patch of maize, creating a small puddle. The elder instructs the child to redistribute the excess water carefully while humming a calming tune. The child mumbles an exaggerated apology under their breath, second joke of the section. In many public spaces, minor offenses involved acts of service or symbolic restitution, such as helping arrange communal goods, assisting with water transport, or participating in cleanup. These acts reinforced social harmony, integrated learning, and allowed participants to visibly contribute to the community's well-being. You continue along a stone path lined with small alcoves where people have left offerings of maize, flowers, and feathers. A young man accidentally disturbs a few of these offerings while passing. The community elder notices immediately and invites him to replace the offerings and recite a short phrase of acknowledgement. It's restorative, calm, and subtly instructive, teaching mindfulness, respect, and social responsibility. Aztec law emphasized that communal offenses were less about punishing the individual and more about restoring balance within the community. Public missteps were addressed through education, restitution, and symbolic acknowledgement. Historians still debate the extent to which these practices were codified versus flexible, allowing local elders discretion to manage infractions. Moving farther, you see a small footbridge where two families' children are practicing a quiet game. One child steps too forcefully, causing a minor ripple in the water below. An elder guides the child to sit, reflect, and assist with maintaining the bridge's wooden rails, both practical and symbolic correction. Third joke, the child grumbles about ancient engineering responsibilities, eliciting quiet amusement from the watching families. Finally, you wander to a communal cooking area near the plaza's edge, where minor mistakes are handled through shared effort. A spilled container of herbs is remedied by distributing them across nearby communal gardens, transforming the error into a learning and productive experience. By the time you leave the public plaza, the sense of restorative justice is palpable. In communal spaces, offenses are addressed quietly, thoughtfully, and often playfully, emphasizing education, participation, and social balance. The Aztec approach here mirrors domestic, market, canal, and temple systems. Mistakes are not feared. They are opportunities to contribute, learn, and maintain harmony. You step back onto the stone street as lanterns flicker along the path. The city feels alive, gentle, and self-correcting, a society orchestrated with patience, ritual, and subtle humor. You notice how even the smallest acts, children picking up fallen maize, apprentices resorting bowls, neighbors negotiating space, create a tapestry of soft correction and communal equilibrium. And as you drift further into the night, the gentle murmur of these public spaces reminds you that even missteps in open areas are embraced as lessons, gently woven into the social fabric of Tenochtitlan.
You move past the lively public plazas and quieter residential neighborhoods, following the soft glow of lanterns toward the outskirts of the city where artisans' workshops and training areas create a more focused, purposeful atmosphere. Here, the offenses you encounter are specialized, skill-based, and often tied to apprenticeship or craft, small missteps that could compromise quality, efficiency, or communal reputation. The Aztec approach to correction in these contexts is fascinating, restorative, instructive, and sometimes gently humorous. You pause outside a pottery workshop, where the smell of damp clay and the soft hiss of water fill the air. An apprentice has slightly misaligned the rim of a ceremonial bowl. The master notices but doesn't raise his voice. Instead, he guides the apprentice through a hands-on demonstration, correcting the alignment and explaining the subtle principles behind the curvature. The correction is calm, practical, and educational. The apprentice physically learns the right technique while understanding the importance of precision. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. In Aztec society, skilled labor was often overseen by masters who combined instruction with corrective measures. Minor errors were typically addressed through practical demonstration rather than punishment. Historians still argue whether severe mistakes, like those that ruined valuable materials, ever led to harsher consequences. But the overarching philosophy emphasized learning and improvement over fear. You step further into the workshop and notice a small mishap with weaving. A young weaver has miscounted threads, creating a subtle asymmetry in a ceremonial cloth. The master calmly gestures for the apprentice to undo and redo the section, guiding her hands carefully. The act itself is the correction. No harsh words, no reprimand, just quiet, focused repetition. In some workshops, repeated minor errors might be ritualized with playful gestures. For instance, an apprentice who consistently misaligned threads could be asked to carry a bundle of extra cotton across the courtyard 3 times before resuming work. A slightly inconvenient task meant to instill mindfulness while eliciting quiet laughter from onlookers. First joke of the section. You wander past a small group of young men learning to carve wood for ceremonial shields. One boy accidentally chips a corner too deeply. The master approaches, not with anger, but with calm guidance, showing him a technique to reshape and repair the piece. The boy follows, learning not just to fix the damage, but to anticipate and prevent future mistakes. Nearby, an apprentice working with metal for decorative jewelry misjudges the heat of the forge. The master intervenes, asking the apprentice to carefully cool, clean, and polish the piece before resuming. Again, the correction is practical, restorative, and instructive. You notice the soft rhythm of the workshop. Mistakes are addressed immediately but gently, integrated into the learning process, and never amplified into embarrassment. A second joke comes to mind as you watch a slightly flustered apprentice accidentally drop a small tray of beads. He mutters to himself, "These beads are plotting against me." His companions chuckle quietly, and the master doesn't intervene, letting the humor diffuse tension before guiding the apprentice to sort and replace the beads. Moving along, you encounter a basket weaver whose early attempts at complex patterns are uneven. Instead of harsh criticism, the mentor demonstrates a rhythmic, meditative approach, counting threads, adjusting tension, and showing subtle hand movements. The process itself becomes the restorative act, correcting both the technique and the apprentice's attention to detail. Elsewhere, a young scribe is copying codices under dim lantern light. A small error in a glyph could disrupt meaning. The elder scribe carefully points out the mistake, guiding the student to correct it and encouraging a quiet reflection on precision. The approach is calm, repetitive, and educational, teaching not only skill but patience and mindfulness, a hallmark of Aztec correction in craft-based environments. You move into a small courtyard where apprentices are learning ritual music. A drum is misaligned. or a melody falters. The instructor stops the group gently, guiding the misplaying apprentice to repeat the rhythm until it aligns with the ensemble. The process emphasizes collaboration, listening, and subtle correction. It's restorative, quiet, and socially reinforcing, teaching that mistakes affect not only the individual, but the collective effort.
A final quirky example comes from a workshop producing ceremonial feathers. A boy accidentally tangles feathers for a headdress. Instead of scolding, the master instructs him to carefully untangle them while softly humming a ritual tune. The task is slightly tedious but calming, restoring order to the materials and reinforcing mindful attention. Third joke, the boy whispers under his breath, "These feathers are auditioning for mischief."
In every specialized workspace, minor errors are opportunities for learning, contribution, and subtle social reinforcement. The Aztecs emphasized repair over retribution, repetition over reprimand, and collaboration over isolation. Whether in pottery, weaving, metalwork, music, or feather crafting, the corrective measures are restorative, educational, and often infused with light humor. By the time you leave the workshops and step onto a wider pathway leading toward the city center, the night feels alive yet serene. The gentle rhythm of soft correction, education, and communal guidance echoes through your mind. Mistakes, whether in craft, music, or ritual preparation, are not feared. They are integrated into the living rhythm of Tenochtitlan, blending accountability, mindfulness, and subtle humor into a city-wide tapestry of restorative justice. You pause for a moment, listening to the soft hum of distant canals, the occasional splash of a paddle, and the quiet steps of late-night pedestrians. Across the city, the principle is consistent. Every misstep is a chance to learn, contribute, and restore balance, quietly, gently, and often with a small smile or chuckle. You walk back toward the central part of Tenochtitlan, the heart of the city now bathed in the soft silver glow of moonlight reflecting off the canals and plazas. The streets are quieter here, the hum of daily activity replaced by a gentle nocturnal rhythm. It's in this final section that you notice a pattern emerging. No matter the offense, market misstep, domestic error, canal disruption, or workshop mishap, the Aztec approach consistently favors restoration, reflection, and subtle, socially integrated correction. A small commotion draws your attention to a plaza where a young man has misstepped during a minor ritual dance. His foot lands slightly off rhythm, disturbing a small arrangement of offerings. Instead of reprimand, the elder guiding the ceremony gestures calmly. The young man kneels, carefully restores the offerings, and then performs a brief symbolic bow to acknowledge the error. You notice how correction here combines practical restitution, symbolic acknowledgement, and gentle public teaching, a method echoed in every corner of the city. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. The Aztec legal and social systems often prioritize restoration over punishment, particularly for minor offenses. Whether in household, craft, market, or religious context, offenders were guided to repair, contribute, or perform a symbolic act that returned balance to the community. Historians still argue about the consistency and universality of these practices, but the principle of restorative action is clear. Nearby, a young apprentice carrying a bundle of maize trips, spilling a portion onto the plaza floor. The crowd watches silently as an elder steps forward, guiding him to gather, redistribute, and share the maize among nearby families. This transforms a small accident into a socially beneficial act, reinforcing mindfulness, responsibility, and empathy. A quirky note, some minor missteps in public spaces were accompanied by light ritualized humor, a playful chant, a mock bow, or a gentle repetition of an apology rhyme, softening correction while maintaining communal awareness. First joke of the section.
Moving along, you witness an interaction between two families negotiating shared space for drying textiles. A minor dispute arises when one family unintentionally encroaches on another's designated area. The elders intervene gently, arranging a schedule and assigning small cooperative tasks. This subtle combination of correction, negotiation, and contribution restores balance without shaming anyone, fostering harmony and mutual understanding. A craftsman at a nearby stall has made a slight error in shaping ceremonial pottery. Instead of scolding, his master guides him to correct the design, emphasizing the meditative repetition necessary for mastery. The apprentice grumbles quietly. Second joke of the section: maybe pottery has its own secret rules, while learning both skill and patience. A little farther, a young musician practicing near a temple has struck the drum off rhythm, momentarily disturbing the meditative hush. The instructor does not scold, but asks the student to repeat a sequence, integrating the correction into practice. You notice a pattern here. Correction is always part of education, blending mindfulness, repetition, and social responsibility seamlessly. You wander past a communal garden where someone has accidentally overwatered a small plot, a minor disruption with potential consequences for plants nearby. The correction is both practical and symbolic. The individual is guided to redistribute water carefully and assist neighbors, transforming a mistake into a productive learning experience. Third joke, the young gardener mutters, "Next time I'll water with a moonbeam instead." In the quieter plazas, subtle offenses are similarly addressed. A child who runs through a meditation circle is asked to carefully place leaves along the edge as a symbolic act of acknowledgement. A marketplace merchant who misweighs goods twice in a row is gently instructed to assist with community distribution for a few hours. These restorative practices extend across contexts, blurring the line between learning, correction, and contribution, a hallmark of Aztec communal philosophy. Even in small personal errors, such as accidentally misplacing tools, spilling maize, or stepping off rhythm in ritual, restorative action prevails. Individuals are guided to correct the physical mistake, reflect on their attention, and participate in a socially meaningful act. Humor often softens the process, allowing mistakes to teach without fear or shame. As you walk along the quiet canals and stone streets one last time, the patterns coalesce. Markets, households, canals, workshops, public plazas all operate under a consistent principle. Minor offenses are met with calm correction, symbolic gestures, and restorative action. Mistakes are reframed as opportunities for learning, contribution, and mindfulness, and humor gently softens the lesson. You can see how this approach strengthens community bonds, fosters attentiveness, and integrates learning into daily life. Now, as the city sleeps beneath the silver glow of moonlight, you feel the rhythm of Tenochtitlan's restorative practices like a gentle pulse beneath your feet. Every minor misstep has been addressed with calm, every error transformed into a lesson or contribution, and every participant guided back into harmony with subtle, patient wisdom. The city system, though ancient, feels timeless in its gentle approach to accountability. You pause at the edge of a quiet plaza, watching shadows stretch across stone, listening to the soft lap of canal water and the occasional nocturnal call of birds. The city exhales around you, every minor correction now woven seamlessly into the rhythm of life. You realize that in Tenochtitlan, mistakes are never wasted. They are transformed into learning, service, and gentle amusement, reinforcing communal balance at every step. Now, take a deep breath and let your attention drift slowly across the city you've wandered tonight. The lanterns flicker softly, the canals shimmer under the moon, and every corner, every courtyard, every plaza seems imbued with calm.
Even the smallest missteps, spilled maize, misaligned threads, or a faltering drumbeat have been quietly transformed into lessons, opportunities, and gentle acts of restoration. There is no harshness here, only patience, soft guidance, and subtle ritual. Feel the rhythm of the city like a gentle hum beneath your awareness, a reminder that every error, every oversight can be met with kindness and mindfulness. Notice how the playful gestures, the soft corrections, and the symbolic restitutions all serve to weave a sense of harmony through daily life. In this space, mistakes are not feared. They are embraced as opportunities to learn, to contribute, and to move gracefully back into balance with your surroundings.
Let your thoughts drift like the water in the canals, slow and reflective. Picture the apprentices, the children, the merchants, and the neighbors, all moving gently, correcting, assisting, and laughing quietly at their own small foibles. Each act, each adjustment contributes to the serene pulse of the city, where accountability and care walk hand in hand.
And as your eyelids grow heavier, allow the calm of Tenochtitlan to settle over you. The soft lantern light, the subtle hum of water, and the knowledge that even mistakes can be met with patience and gentle guidance help you drift deeper into rest. Your mind can carry this sense of balance, humor, and restorative harmony as it floats slowly towards sleep. Sweet dreams.